the Storm Tracker Podcast.
All right, it's the Storm Tracker Podcast here. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals Network. And it's Monday, which means sometimes it's Blue Mondays. And today we've got Larry Blustein, South Florida insider, legendary insider, joining me today. Thanks for joining the show once again, Larry.
Not a problem. Thank you, Marcus, for having him.
All right. So this weekend, Larry, we were at actually, before I get started, I always got to forget to say like, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to CanesCounty.com. Like I said, part of the Rivals Network, and make sure you share this podcast as well. But like I was saying, we were at the TuTu Atwell 7-on-7 this weekend. And boy, was it hot. It was another scorcher out there in South Florida. And there was a great amount of talent out there, per usual. A lot of top South Florida high school programs were out there, including Chaminade, Miami Central, Miami Northwestern, who is kind of the de facto host of the event, along with Miami Norland, Booker T. Washington, teams that have kind of tore it up this off-season 7-on-7 season this year. And there were some, like I said, there were some great players out there. A lot of players stood out to me. Jeremiah Smith, obviously, Joshisa Trader were excellent, leading their team, Chaminade, to a tournament victory. This tournament's now in its second year, Larry, and it looks like it's here to stay. What stood out to you about this tournament?
Well, first of all, I thank the TuTu Atwell Foundation for what they've been able to do. And, I've known TuTu forever, a good and great family. And, his dad used to play back in the day at Miami High. And the one thing that he's and he told me, he was on a radio show last week, and he said the inspiration really for him to give back is from Teddy Bridgewater, who does a lot of the same. He kind of used Teddy as a role model through growing up and kind of followed in his path and done pretty well at doing it. But he really loves to give back to the community. And that's the one thing that people, there's a lot of athletes, that come from South Florida, but very few of them will do things like this. And it, as you said, I think what's happening now, it's kind of morphed into an off-season event, pretty much the last one of the summer, that is going to be, I think everybody's going to want to be in it next year, and everybody's going to want to jump into it, because if you look, and you had just mentioned the teams that were in there, how many areas of the country would he be able to have that much football talent on two fields? I don't think anywhere. I don't care where you go. And here you have, as you mentioned, a wide receiver core of Jeremiah Smith and Joshisa Trader, arguably the two best 2024 kids in the country at that position. And then you added Kyle Washington, who I think is a really good football player. He's got speed. He makes things happen. And then the addition of Denarius Gray, who came in from Boynton Beach, from Somerset Canyons, another a young sophomore kid. So they're setting the table for the future. You have a quarterback, I think a guy who really probably upped his stock with the fans, not so much to colleges, because he's already on his way to NC State, is Cedric Bailey.
Absolutely.
A 6'7" quarterback. And he's the only guy I've ever seen that, if you know how guys, if they're 5'11", 170, they'll say they're 6'1", 180. He downplays it. He says he's 6'5", and what a good guy. He's a hard worker. Like I said, he's on his way to NC State. Miami Central, obviously they were the winners last year. By the way, the cash prize is $5,000, which is matched by the NFL. So Chaminade walks away with 10 grand for the program.
Wow.
Like everyone's saying, wow, they don't need that. But you know what? Everybody needs it. I mean, they travel a lot. They do a lot of things. That's less fundraising that they're going to have to do. But you look at Miami Central, and I'll tell you right now, I mean, if there was a draft of wide receivers, obviously Josiah Trader and Jeremiah, but what about LaWayne McCoy? I don't think that kid gets enough credit, Marcus, for what he brings to the table. I think he's an awesome football talent. I think he makes big catches. He's a verbal to Florida State. Everybody, he's a big body kid at 6'2", 180, 185. I think also we got a chance to see the quarterbacks at Central. I mean, I don't think they had as great a weekend as they could have had, but listen, it's a great thing for Coach Jude Joseph to have three such really, really good high school quarterbacks, and they did real well. Another kid that caught my mind was Sekou Smith, who I think is a really, really good athlete type of kid. I think he's doing, extremely well. I'll tell you, I wrote a story earlier this summer on the secondary at Booker T. Washington, the size, the athletic ability, and we got a chance to see a lot of that. We saw Antonio Branch Jr., who I like a lot. Saw Andre Brown Jr., a kid that a wide receiver kind of asserted himself. Gerald Modest, who's going to probably have to take a bulk of the carries this year with AJ, coming back slowly. I think that Gerald Modest, a lot of people don't say a lot about him. His brother also, Gerard, who's a young kid, a wide receiver out there. So we had an opportunity to see them. Northwestern, when we talk about them being the unofficial, host, which they were, but they really, really have surprised me. I went to their spring game. Michael Lee Harris, from the exercises all the way throughout the whole game, was upbeat, wearing, even in the heat of the spring, wearing a tie and shirt and all that stuff. And I think he's energized this program. Never will take anything away from what Max Edwards did, because he brought in 3 titles. So, but I think that program is really energized. They have Darius Johnson came over from Edison as a wide receiver. They have a couple of good quarterbacks. They have a young quarterback, and then they have the kid Posse, who much travel. But you know what? I thought he kind of I thought he's really, really shown well here in the spring and into the summer. The athletic kid that they have for 2027, Nick Lanier, who really kind of took out. He kind of took over the show. You look at them, and then you look at Homestead, obviously Cortez Mills, James Randall comes in from Mainland High School. So 2 receivers there. That's going to give the kid Josh Townsend someone to throw to, and obviously in Norland, everybody talks a lot about them, and I think they talk about themselves enough too. But you look at Ennio Yapoor, look, and it's kind of strange because Frank Tucker and I were talking about him, and he really is like Daniel Richardson. Daniel brings a lot, obviously, different things to the table, but from a size-wise, and people don't want to understand that that's what college coaches look at. They look at the measurables. I mean, and obviously, you have a kid who's just about 6 foot. I'll say that because his dad's going to probably watch this. But he's a leader, and the kid could throw, and he could run. And much like Daniel, he wins. Who cares, what he looks like? He's a winner. Jade Card, who I think is, one of the, if you're looking at transfer portal, the great transfer portal kids, from this offseason. comes from South Broward. This kid could play anywhere, wide receiver, safety, cornerback. I mean, he's 6'2", he's 190 pounds. I mean, the kid's a huge addition. And speaking about huge additions, they were kind of light in the secondary, and they picked up Jamari Howard, who was at Westland Hialeah, and then they're going to get the kid Tarver, who just committed to Maryland from the prep school, and then you look at a wide receiver, a young kid that's making his way through his Ivory Aikens. So you had a lot of talent on those teams. Obviously American had Jordan Campbell, who's a young guy who's been around, but I think he's only a 2025 or 6 kid. Also, Darrell Bell from Goldman. I mean, as they say, he sticks out like a sore thumb on a program like that. But, you got to give Coach Ariel Cribero a lot of credit for what he's been able to do with Goldman and get those kids over there. But Darrell's one of those guys, who's a 2026 kid. Obviously, he's a Power 5 guy. That's something that Goldman doesn't produce, a whole lot of. But, yeah, there was a lot of talent. You look at a lot of those schools that were on hand, and I think the programs that came really enjoyed themselves because they were in the spotlight. As well as I do, because you're on the internet a lot too. You can't let wind out without anybody knowing. Nowadays everybody's going to comment on everything you do. So it's a big spotlight for a high school kid to be under because there's a lot of people watching, a lot of people commenting. And I thought 2 great days. As you said, it was about 1 billion degrees. And, but that's the one thing you got to give the organizers credit. I mean, they had gallons and gallons of liquid to give the kids and ice and and then also you look at a guy who and I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I was talking to a couple of coaches at the event the other day, and I said, you know how lucky we are to have somebody like Ice Harris. I mean, here's a guy, Marcus, who epitomizes being a coach. I mean, he's a disciplinarian. He's very knowledgeable. He's a no-nonsense guy. And to have him around, I think he's easily one of the top coaches that I've covered. And, just because of what he brings to the table. And as well as I do that you look at any inner city, and it's really tough to take those kids and, to keep that discipline going. But he rules with an iron fist. And I think Michael Lee Harris is starting to do that as well. And we know Jude Joseph, when he took over Central, that was a difference because he expected a lot, but he didn't take any grief from the kids. And if you didn't want to be there, you were gone.
Absolutely. Coach Ice, just a legendary coach, and probably in the conversation of one of the most legendary coaches in all of South Florida history. And Michael Lee Harris and Jude Joseph off to really great starts as well. Obviously, Jude Joseph last year with the undefeated season for Miami Central, a legendary team that beat IMG Academy. And now Michael Lee Harris, I enjoyed watching him as a wide receiver. For Miami Northwestern, and then he moved on to Louisville. So it's great to see him revitalize that program. Now, no disrespect at all to Coach Max Edwards. He is also a legendary coach in his own right, bringing 3 state championships to a legendary program in Miami Northwestern. For me, I mean, you kind of named all the great players that were out there, but a couple of players that I saw that you didn't mention was Chris Ewald, man. This kid is a dynamic.
Already committed as a junior.
Right, to Michigan. Just a dynamic cover corner, and a lot of times he was matched up against Florida State commit LaWayne McCoy, and it was just a great battle to watch. And oftentimes Ewald, who's a 2025 prospect, won several of those battles. Another one is Zaquan Patterson. The other 5-star out of Chaminade. He's just super athletic, very rangy. I don't think you quite see just how dynamic he is in 7-on-7 because he's not able to get as physical as he would like. But he was just an outstanding talent that day too. And the Central quarterbacks, yeah, I do have to say something about them as well. The kid Kritza from the West Coast coming over is
Beckham.
yeah, he's just a great talent. Unfortunately, Central came up a little bit short, but they were in it in every game, and of course they are going to be a force this season on the gridiron. And that comparison to Daniel Richardson with EJ Yapoor, I think, is spot on. I really think he is that type of quarterback. Daniel Richardson obviously was outstanding quarterback playing for Miami Carroll City. Set
And still is. He's going to be starting at FAU.
Yeah, right. Had a stint over there at Central Michigan, and now is at FAU. Had the record for most yards in Dade County. Before that was broken like several times in the past couple of years here. But all of these South Florida talents, you kind of see them, and you think about the Miami Hurricanes and what they've built over the past few years, or I should say past few decades with championships, and a lot of the talent came from right here in South Florida or Florida. And there's always this notion about keeping South Florida talent home or locking down the state of Miami. And a lot of the times Miami does get that talent, and sometimes they don't. We've seen plenty of times over the years that like talents like Brandon Ennis are going to Ohio State, Jerry Jeudy going to Alabama, Amari Cooper going to an Alabama, um, Hollywood Brown going to an Oklahoma. There's just several times where they do not get the premier talent that's here in South Florida to stay in Coral Gables. How important do you think that is for the Miami Hurricanes in particular that are, living in this football hotbed of South Florida talent to kind of keep that talent home?
Well, first of all, even back when they were ruling the college football world, whether it be in the 80s or back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they were always losing kids. You look Derek Thomas and Marvin Jones and Steve Hutchinson and Isaac Bruce and players like that. They've always, and even now, you look at the recruiting class last year, and, with Darryl Porter coming back, from his West Virginia commitment, and then you look at the Washington brothers, how they've done, and you look at somebody like Wesley Basaint, and you kind of, you look at those guys, and you look at Ray, and then you say to yourself, you can't get everyone. And what I think is a unique mix now is you're tapping into more of a national recruiting base than you've ever had before because of Mario Cristobal, what he's been able to do on the West Coast, what he, the friendships and the relationships he made at Rutgers and at Alabama, and his assistant coaches who have Louisiana ties, who have Texas ties. And I think that's what you're seeing a lot more of now. And I think the portals kind of dictated that too, Marcus, because you can't, you would much rather take a sophomore, junior type kid who's seasoned than maybe that incoming freshman. And that incoming freshman may be from Northwestern or Edison or wherever. But because that guy that you need is somebody who can come in and play right away, you take a kid from Alabama, you take a kid from Georgia, so I don't think is that much emphasis. Sure, you would like to hold on to somebody like an Ennis or Jeudy, but it's not, that's just the way things have always been. You look at some of the talent that Miami's quote unquote lost over the years, but still maintained to win. I think it's kind of overblown. I think they have kids. Yeah, you would like to see them. I mean, you pick out guys like an Ennis, you pick out guys like that because they're marquee kids. But along the way, Miami still manages to keep some high star rated kids home as well. But I see your point, but I think times have changed because of the portal, because of the fact that, the roster spots are limited. And the one thing is, though, if you look at last year's roster as opposed to this year, you don't always want to just have a kid from South Florida just to have that kid. I mean, you could see now, and I pointed this out last week when I was with you, that if you look at the roster on July 10th of 2022, and now you look at it July 10th of 2023, it's an 80% turnaround. So you have more kids from all over, the country. I mean, but you have to parlay that success. You have to, the success that Mario and the coaching staff have had on that West Coast. And, it tapped into the Oregons and the Washingtons and the Californias and Nevadas and places like that, because he's making a lot. His relationships here now, if you look, and I'm not taking shots at any regimes that were in the past, but I think the high school coaches relationship and the player relationship is better than it's been in 25, 30 years in South Florida, like in Miami-Dade, Broward, throughout the state of Florida, because they all respect what's going on. Before no one really reached out to a lot of these kids from Orlando or going up to Jacksonville and getting a big time lineman, or, going to Orlando or Tampa area. That really wasn't in the cards in the past, but you could see what the respect everybody has for this program. And they understand that a good year this year will just take this program off. I mean, they win 7-8 games this year, Marcus. The sky's the limit, because look at they're doing off of a 5-7 year.
Right, exactly, which is outstanding. This coaching staff has to be commended for what they are doing recruiting wise.
Right.
On one of the worst seasons in the last 30 to 40 years. But is it important, you think, for this team to get more wins? Let's say 8 wins, let's just say 8 wins. Let's just put it at that, because Vegas has the Miami Hurricanes at 7.5. So 8 wins by the national standards, or Vegas standards, would be a successful season. And we all know how important recruiting is. We've been talking about it before this entire podcast. And Miami had a top 10 class last season, which we just stated is outstanding, considering how the program has been the past couple of years. A little up and down, but for the most part, mediocre. Is it more important for the Hurricanes to get a top 10 recruiting class or 8 wins this season?
Well, I think, it's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? I mean, because you would like to keep the recruiting going, but at the same time, to do that, you have to start achieving. This is a now society, that. Yeah. I mean, you have college coaches coming into jobs and they're winning 9 and 10 games right away, for one reason or another. But it's become that immediacy, and you cautiously look at the schedule this year. And as you mentioned, I think nationally they're expected to win 7-7. I just want them to make a bowl game. Because I sat there last year in the postseason and looked at schools like New Mexico and Eastern Michigan, and I'm thinking they're making bowl games, but here's Miami sitting home. I mean, and I don't care if it's a Tax Slayer Bowl or the Orange Bowl. You got to have a little bit of notoriety, because those games, as well as I do, in between those, after Christmas all the way to the first of the year, all those games have a nice slot nationally. So you're getting a chance, the kids are getting a chance to watch these teams play. Now, Miami, that being said, It's you look at the schedule and they need to come out of the gate, as we mentioned last week. I mean, if they could beat Texas A&M, I think that's a huge boost because they're going to be 4 or 5 games in without a loss before they have to go and play a North Carolina or a Clemson, and they'll have more confidence. And we will know as fans and analysts what Miami's about. So I would much rather open up with a Miami of Ohio than I would in Alabama.
Sure.
I mean, or LSU, just to open up with marquee teams, especially when you're young. I mean, if you're stacked like a Georgia and Alabama or Ohio State, those first games can be Notre Dame or they can be USC. But Miami's at that point now where they're looking for every advantage possible. And I think that this year, as I said, if you pin me down right now, and usually I know a lot about these teams, the team, I couldn't really tell you what the expectations are because you look at 37 different faces on a team. When they go, well, 1 or 2 or 3 kids don't make a difference. 37 does.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're looking at it. So I think it's pivotal that they go to a bowl game. As you mentioned, if they can win 7 or 8 regular season games and come up with a bowl win, you got 9 wins. And that's not so bad. In this day and age, I mean, you win 9 games, then you could go to those marquee guys like a Brandon Innes or a Jeremiah Smith and say, listen, you know what? We didn't go to a bowl game last year and we won 5. This year we were on national TV 3 times and we won 9 games, and we're going to get kids. And I think that's the big difference because, it used to be that the kids didn't really even care. They would come just to get some playing time. Now it's all the bells and whistles. And if you remember when USC and Miami both went on probation that year, Miami attacked it by getting Tracy Howard and Duke Johnson, where USC went and got 5-star linemen so they could get 2-star running backs to look much better. So that's what Miami's done now. They've gone out and got quality guys in the trenches. You have in Lee and Javion Cohen, you got 2 seasoned veterans with a lot of experience playing and leading. So you got them to start out with. Then the core that you had from last year, plus 3 freshmen or 2 freshmen that come in with a extensive, a lot to, high ceilings and stuff. So that's what you have at every position. You added running backs, you added wide receivers, you added secondary kids. Linebacker wise, I think that their future is just crazy good because of all the guys like a Gary and kids coming in like that, especially because of the fact that you got some infusion from that portal with Malagoa's brother who looks the part, and I think he's going to be a playmaker. And so you're a whole different team, than you were when, November, when we ended against Pittsburgh last year. And then you looked at, wow, this roster. And I said this before, and I will never back away from it. Having followed this team for a long, long time, last year might have been the worst roster they've ever had. I mean, especially because here's something to back that up. You were down to a walk-on running back.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. So, I think there's so much to look forward to in the fact that you have the pieces in place from a leadership standpoint, from a coaching standpoint to succeed. And I think that's a very important part.
Very critical year for the Miami Hurricanes here in 2023. A lot of hometown kids already on the roster that are looking to make a huge impact. Cameron Kinchins, obviously the All-American. Ruben Bain looking to make some noise in year 1. Wesley Basaint looking to make some noise in year 2, as well as Nigel Lee Kelly. The future definitely seems bright with those 37 new players on the roster. And they're not just out from South Florida, like you said, because of Mario Cristobal's recruiting prowess across the entire country. Larry Blustein, ladies and gentlemen, South Florida legendary insider, kind enough to join me today. Where can people find more information about the stuff that you bring forth?
You can join us. We have our radio show each week. This week it's on a Wednesday. Probably get you on as we do all the time. And it's good informative show on WQAM. It gives an opportunity for college coaches, analysts from around the state, whether it be UCF or USF or FSU or Florida, to kind of tell you a little bit about their team. So, I mean, even though we try to have a Hurricane guest every week, we kind of leave it open to everybody so they could listen to the show, and we don't pigeonhole them and the thinking it's just one school that we deal with. And then we have our LarryBlustein.com, which is something that deals Dayton Broward, a lot of local features, team stuff, and then our Prep Red Zone Florida coverage, which I think has really, really stepped up the game. We've covered 139 high schools around the state already, with about 30 more to go, in depth on all the teams, their players. And so that's it. And we're on every Monday night on the Six Ring Canes podcast with Jazz Santana and Vish and DJ, and we kind of banner things around in all sports. So it's an exciting time, and me and you will be joining each other here a lot more in the coming months.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Larry, for joining me today for Blue Mondays. And football season is almost coming up. I can smell it, I can smell the grass, and I can smell the coaches yelling at the kids. It's going to be coming up soon. That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, live from Canes County. Also, make sure you visit our website, canescounty.com, part of the Rivals Network, for a lot of exclusive information regarding Miami Hurricanes athletics. Until the next episode.